Welcome back to the Whispers from the Shadow podcast. I'm Super Jimmy.
I'm Miz.
I messed up earlier because I forgot to actually record the audio, so that's my fault.
Yeah, we were just talking about how hiccups happen. It sucks, but it happens.
Like Miz was going on a great tangent, giving a great answer, and I was like sitting there and I looked over and the audio wasn't picking up, and I was like, I forgot to unmute us.
Which happens. It's an accident. Shit happens. The thing that we were going to be talking about today was classical horror. The foundation of what we have today is how I was saying it. Like, say what you will about horror movies any point in time, but it's like you have to give it to like where it first all originally started, because you wouldn't be where we are today if it wasn't for the beginning.
I 100% agree.
Mm-hmm. And then the other thing we're doing is we're going through all of our, what would you say, social media platforms and answering some questions.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And the first one was by Redfire Luna. And it was, what was the question again?
In what world would we want to... I've already given my answers on these. I'll reiterate my answers from YouTube after Miz gives his. Redfire Luna's first question is, she wants to know, in what world would we want to live in horror movies?
And for me, I gave a little weird like answer in a sense. It's like, depends on which one would you like to say for like survivability, or like just what would you think would be fun, so on and so forth. For me personally, I would like to be in the Saw world, just because I would love to see the ingenuity and what other stories would pop up from like John's image. Like, again, like with Spiral, the Book of Saw. I loved how that was like taking what that was and applying it to somewhere else. I love that idea. So I would love to live into that world to see how many would spawn, I guess you would say, and go from there. And if we're going to say like which one we would not want to live in, anything with like zombies or any like bacteria, stuff like that, or fungi, or like rage virus like 28 Days Later and stuff like that, for the sole fact of I don't mind survival. It's just that like I don't trust people enough, so I would be that one hermit person and like probably end up putting a bullet in my head well before everything else happens, and to survive months down the line. But I feel like the Saw universe would be fun to live in.
You know, I didn't think about the Saw universe when I gave my answer on this one. I said any kind of John Carpenter zombie movie would be fine by me.
No, I'm good. I am 100% good off of that shit.
Oops. Because I was like, you know what? Like I feel like I do okay in a zombie movie. Not just because like of like my instinct to automatically not trust people I don't know, but because like, hey, zombies would be fun. Like, you know, like.
But see, that's the thing, is it's always like, again, in video games is like a prime example. It's like, it's always fun, just like, oh yeah, these zombies die in one hit, like Left 4 Dead. You just shoot them in the head, they're done. But when you put the scarcity of ammo, the scarcity of your own sanity, and the scarcity of just materials in general, like to sustain for a prolonged period of time, I don't care what fiction you read, what things you watch, that would only last for so long unless you literally were able to just start eradicating everything. Not only that, you have to like watch everything. If you have like a snoring person, that attracts already a lot right there, because like, lack of a better way to read it or take it as it is, like when you think of like zombies, my first reaction is Max Brooks, World War Z, the book, and how there's like sub stories from like all of history of quote unquote documented zombie interactions throughout time, or stuff like that. And you know, it's like, it's so hard to really.
I didn't think about any of that.
It happened. I mean, like, but see, this is where we work so well together, is like we have these difference of opinions, or like same thought processes and stuff.
But other than any kind of John Carpenter zombies movie, I would have to say like anything with kind of like a. I would say anything with like kind of like what was the name of that? What was the name of that movie where the kids fell in the hole and then they got like telekinetic powers? What was that?
Was that The Covenant? No, was it?
The Covenant would be a good one, but you'd have to be born into that to actually have those powers. You couldn't just come across them.
What the hell was that one? I know what you're talking about, because the one that goes all rogue and stuff, like just starts killing people for the fun of it and stuff. Oh my god!
I'll Google it so that way we're not racking our brains.
No, but it's gonna bother me.
Movie where the
Kids fall down a well.
three
Oh my god, what was that
friends
called?
fall in a circus. No, hole and get
I can
superpowers.
see it because I think it has Harry Osborn, actor from the Amazing Spider-Man series, in it.
Chronicle.
What was it called?
Chronicle.
Chronicle. Yes.
It had the kid that played Osborn, the guy
From
the
Amazing Spider-Man. Yeah.
yeah, and it was
That's what I thought.
it was a good movie. Three high school friends gain superpowers after making an incredible discovery underground. Yeah, Chronicle. Yeah, it came out in 2012. It was pretty good. It was a pretty good movie.
Well, I thought the movie was older.
Yeah, I thought it was like 2010 or between like 2010 2008. But
Yeah. I thought it was like 09 to like 10, something like that.
But yeah, I think like for me, if I were to change my answer, it'd be something along those lines to where it's like, oh no, I fell into this vat of toxic waste and now I have
Actual
the same
superpowers and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. That'd be an interesting one. I would see superhero worlds I would definitely be a supervillain, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, but I mean, like for a horror movie aspect though, that would be what was the name of that movie where the kid had like Superman's powers, but he would turn evil?
That's what I'm Bright something.
Yeah, I think it was like Brightfield, Bright.
I was gonna say
Brightburn.
Brightburn, yes. I was gonna say Bright Powder, but that's Pokemon. I've been on a Pokemon kick. Sorry.
And then I kind of gave a general answer for both of us on this next one, but Luna again asked, "What horror movies do you want to remake?" Did basically like asking us what movies we would want to see remade. I'll give this answer after yours.
So that's a very, very tough question for me because, as I've stated through either like through streams or through this, I've said, I think in last episode and stuff like that, I'm not the biggest fan of remakes for 90% of them. And then when they are like what we're talking about today, older generation movies, bringing them to today's standards, I am like usually 90% against, but there are those gems that do it well, or
yes,
a way I never thought of it and like how they adapted it.
Evil Dead, for example.
Invisible Man. There's so many more. Like there's a lot. But if we're gonna go like what I would like to see almost verbatim remade, I personally would love to see the original movie Monsters remade not as they were, but like that same like pretty much copy paste into today's standards. I know it'd be a lot harder with like Frankenstein for the sole fact of like having that whole thing. But if you kept like that time period the same, but just shot it today's standard wise, I would enjoy the hell out of those, I think.
Interesting fact about that. The Mummy movie with Tom Cruise was actually supposed to start
the Dark Universe. Yes, I know. And I
kind of wish it had
about it.
Yeah,
I kind of wish it would, just to see some of that. But at the same time, I'm very happy it didn't, mainly because I know Cruise was trying to like control that whole thing. And regardless of how he is with a person or movies and sorts of, I don't want him to tamper with that stuff personally, because I mean, The Mummy already didn't do well because of his tampering. So I'm okay with that not being made.
Yeah, I do like the fact that Russell Crowe was a like starring cast member in that. I thought he did a great job.
Yeah, because he was supposed to be Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah. And speaking of Russell Crowe, before I give my answer, speaking of Russell Crowe, I've heard a lot of mixed reviews on
For the Pope's Exorcist.
I still want to see it. I recommend everybody go see it. Yeah. I even if I give my opinion on anything, I recommend everybody go see it, form your own opinion. I'll just give you tidbits of what I think and what I didn't like personally, and I would expect, someone to do the same. Miz does it like all the time, like, hey, I didn't like this part, and this part, but overall I love aspects, these. Yeah. And I'm kind of the same way, but I haven't seen it for myself yet, which I'm going to. It still piques my interest. But yeah, for the general answer that I gave for this question, what horror movie remake would we like to see done? I said we both are the any remake of a movie can be good if done right type of mindset, but any kind of movie that was received poorly would be a good honestly. Like anything that kind of was way overhyped. Like, and when it came out, it was just like, what is this bag of ass? Yeah. And I was like,
like even with some book movies where it's like they tried to Hollywoodize the book too much and left out the book.
Yeah.
An example for me would be like Silence of the Lambs. They only use like half of that book, but you get like Red Dragon, and Red Dragon used the whole book, and it's so fucking good.
Yeah, like I'm a big fan of Red Dragon because they did use the whole book. It was a good book. It was a really dry read in my personal opinion, because like
it's still fantastic to me though. Like I'm not the dry. I don't like dry reading for the most part, but like I fell in love with that book, and then the movie was just done so well. It's very well paced for me. Yeah, I enjoyed the hell out of it. Like,
my only gripe between the book and movie translation was how they described his tattoo in the book versus how it appeared
what you got in the movie. Yeah,
yeah.
I
pictured something totally different. It was just the way they described it. It was just,
you get Ralph Fiennes his ass in the shot. Come on.
fair. You're like, them's his buns of steel. That man does squats. But yeah, I would have to say I would love to see like Sam Raimi get his hands on like what was a horror movie that just like bombed recently? That was there's been a lot. I mean, I could see him doing a very good iteration of like It Follows for the most part. Yeah,
for what it was. I could see him throwing in some fun little spooky shit to make it good. I mean,
knowing Sam Raimi, he could enhance it.
Yeah, if I'm gonna choose like any specific director to kind of like remake something, it'd be too hard, because like the two that I would absolutely love to see do something with would be Romero and Craven, but unfortunately R.I.P. But like for me personally, it'd be like I would love to see like Craven get his hands on like anything from Hitchcock or Kubrick to be remade. Personally, I feel like he could do. Exactly. I could see him doing something super subtle like Birds or Vertigo and bring that horror into like now. And then with like Romero, I would really love to see any of the monster movies specifically from his point of view.
I would have to agree. Yeah. Like I would like to see Sam Raimi do like anything that was received poorly, or if we could have gotten a couple of the, Romero remakes of monster movies or anything like that, and then like we discussed in the last one, any of the sequels that never saw the light of day, whether it be through production hell or something like that, like
actors trying to get directors, so on and so forth.
Like I could see that. And then for Luna's last question, she asked, did you see Babadook?
And we've talked extensively on that movie. It's an okay movie to me. I know a lot of people that absolutely love that movie. The Babadook is an okay movie to me. I wish I got a little bit more out of it, but
same.
Can't really complain about it. I don't think it was terrible by any means. I just didn't think it was great.
Yeah. And that's kind of the answer that I gave. It was yes, Miz and I both have seen it. It was okay. I have a few complaints about it, but it's not bad overall. I didn't think it was a bad movie. I just like, there's some gripes that I have with it, and those are just personal stuff.
Yeah, for me, it felt like it was missing some things, or could have done more, or elaborated on more, or done some things. But like, I enjoyed the ride I got. I didn't think it was great. I know it's not terrible. It's just not my movie.
Yeah, and Luna commented and said, "I hated the ending. The rest was fine." I didn't think that. I didn't think the ending was the best personally, so I have to agree with her there.
I can appreciate the ending for what it was, but I don't think it was terrible because they've done it definitely. Yeah, but again, the movie as a whole to me was like, I'd say a solid 6. Neither great nor bad, but I do think it's better than worse.
Yeah, that's fair. And then the last question comes to us from Grizz. Arustuk Grizz, but we're going to answer that one at the end of the podcast.
End of this. Yes. End it with it.
So I will let Miz kick off the classic horror films, and it's basically the topic that we're talking about is classic horror films. Revisit some of the most iconic horror films of all time and discuss what makes them timeless and terrifying.
So for me, and this is only going to be for me, I will not speak for anybody else, but for me, what makes me love the classic movies a lot more by anything today's standards is the sole fact of like there was a certain love and appreciation for those films. I mean, you had to, like, especially in like the 20s and 30s films, is like a lot of them, especially in the 20s, like had no real audio. It was card has words on it, but you're seeing the people react. And in some senses, like that's where that mannequin feeling for a lot of people of like something inanimate moving towards you is terrifying, is like that subtlety of small things that old silent horror films and like later monster movies is like brought to real life for a lot of people, in that phobia of just like what lurks beneath the, you know, what's underneath your bed, what's under here. And one of my favorite things about it, though, with the love behind it, is that you have like your Lon Chaney Sr. and Jr. who consistently brought their own makeups and all their tins and all their stuff to do the makeup themselves, then their shoot, and consistently change and alter as they go through. It is just fantastic. And it makes them classic because of that love. Now, obviously, there are some ones that are going too far and using too realism and so on and so forth, where like they have used, you know, real dead bodies and so on and so forth. I mean, but that's also like later. Like, I think some, I was gonna say like 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s have like several instances that you can see that in.
Yeah, because it was just cheaper to use real bodies than props for some reason.
Yeah, or just go grave robbing, same thing.
We're gonna borrow that corpse when you're done with the funeral. Yeah,
you don't mind that, right? Okay, cool.
Come here, Granddad.
I was saying, if you do have a problem with that, don't worry, you'll never know they're missing. But it's just, I feel like even it was like fresh ideas as well was like a big thing too. Like, I mean, you have like the Jekyll and Hyde, you have your monster movies, you have Nosferatu, you have the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Cat People in the 60s. Like, there's a lot of like weird ones out there that just like freaks. There's a lot that's just, they tried new ideas and it kind of paved the way for like, hey, they did something like this, what can we do? I mean, like when you think of freaks, like circus freaks and so on and so forth, and like you could put it into like The Hills Have Eyes or Deformity with like Friday the 13th. Like it just brings out those ideas that you see down the line of like where they could have gotten character designs and set pieces and so on and so forth, or set up the idea of like the whole final girl, or this is what happens when you have premarital sex and all that fun jazz, you know? Like tropes that we have today.
I have to agree. What I love about the old school horror movies, like 20s, 30s, 50s, all the way up to today, even like the quote unquote modern classics, is the fact that like you notice kind of a theme with a lot of the older ones where they were going based off of the old books. And I'm dyslexic, and the way I get over my dyslexia is by reading books and reading stuff just constantly. Like I have to constantly read, or else like I start to fall back into that whole, how do I say that word? How do I pronounce that? And it messes me up. And the way that I actually got into reading, believe it or not, was reading the original Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And when I saw the old movie of it, where it was Mary Shelley's Frankenstein done in, I think it was the 60s or 50s. I can't remember.
Are we talking Boris Karloff one, or are we talking
one of the other? That was
Karloff. 1931.
Okay, I'm sorry. It was 31. and when I first saw that, I had like it was a collector's tin of DVDs of horror movie classics. It had Wolfman, Invisible Man, The Thing from the Black Lagoon, The Blob, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, Nosferatu, and what inspired The Day of the Dead. I can't remember the name of that one. I think it was just The Night of the Living Dead was the name of it.
Well, Night of the Living Dead was 1967 by Romero. Before that, there really wasn't too many like zombie-esque movies. That's why he's always been dubbed as the Godfather of Zombies.
Yeah, I think it was Romero's Zombies movie, Night of the Living Dead. I think
that was 1967. It was like 67 or 68. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I can't either. But I had that tin, and I had just started reading Dean Koontz's take on Frankenstein. I had just started getting more into literature versions of like the horror aspect, because what I love about the literature aspect of what inspired, you know, the movie monsters we have today is that your mind just runs wild. Whereas in the old classical movies, they bring what everybody thought was like a generalized 7 foot, I think it was like 7'4" corpse that had been dug up from 16 or 17 different graves and reanimated.
All these different things. And that's also the thing too, that like really shows the drastic change. Because back then you didn't need a lot to scare people. I mean, no. Dracula with fangs, boom, that was instantly terrifying. Showing stop motion animation of him transforming into a bat was terrifying.
The little rubber bat on the fishing line.
Exactly. I mean, you even have like we've heard like so many movies coming out like, oh, this movie might need to both send you to the hospital. It's like, but in 1930s, like Frankenstein literally did send people to the hospital because no one has seen stuff like that, and it was terrifying for people.
Yeah.
And like now today's standards, yeah, it's like, oh my God, that's so cheesy. How is that fucking terrifying? So much has changed over the past, 80, 90 years, 100 years of films.
Yeah.
And like that technology or effects. And I mean, we all watch 80s movies now and think they're cheesy as hell. But in the 80s, that was top of the line. That was terrifying. Yeah. And no matter what decade you look at, I mean, even still today's standards movies, there's some that's like, oh, this isn't terrifying at all. But for a lot of people, it is.
Yeah. Like you look at the which one was the one that came out in the early 2000s, late 90s? Was it H2O? Was that the
for Halloween? Yeah, Halloween H2O. I think that was like 99. I think
it was 99 or 2000. Yeah, I haven't either.
For the H2O.
That was honestly my favorite Halloween movie until I actually like sat down and watched all of them on Halloween as a movie marathon in like the early 2000s, late like 2006, I want to say. And like looking at the effects that they had from the 80s Halloween going into the 90s and 2000s, like the effects were cheesy. Like they wouldn't even show like the actual knife like touching the body.
Someone. It would be like a close up of their chest, which would be the prop, and then zoom out and you just see like the handle embedded in them. Yeah, it's small things like that also have changed into today's. I mean, like now we have movies where it like fully looks like they're actually stabbing.
Mm-hmm. And like, I always kind of like get like, oh, that's, I didn't, you know what? I haven't thought about that movie in forever. It Came from Outer Space is still one of my favorite horror movies to watch. And the reason being is because it shows like the little asteroid or the UFO. I haven't watched it in probably close to 20 years now. It Came from Outer Space was was floating in like what looked like what would be considered a kindergarten's background of outer space. And then like a little fishing line with whatever it was in, just kind of like.
Well, yeah, because that was the way it was. I mean, The Day the Earth Stood Still was a prime example of that as well. I mean, that's why you have this generalized idea of what a UFO looks like. It's usually just, a ball with a ring around it and it's your flying saucer. That's like a lot of the main things. I mean, another one would be like if you watch some of the old monster movies and stuff like that, is you don't even really see a lot of blood in it because that was already pushing a limit. But it was more of the fact of them dying was that like crossing a line. That's what made this horrifying.
And fun fact, the first instance of a toilet being shown in movie, television, anything was the movie Psycho. And it like as cheesy as that as the original Psycho would be considered by today's standards, that was groundbreaking back then. Like
it was also
it won so many awards.
I was gonna say that's also a prime example of why I love like remakes done right. Like American Psycho being done like in today's standard in a way is like done so well. Like if you do it properly or you can change small things in a good way, it can help it out. But then again, you have the other side of the coin of like it could have been complete dog shit.
Yeah, I have to agree. Like I love American Psycho for the I love it for the fact that it's a reiteration / retelling of Psycho, but I also love the oversell we get from Christian Bale. I love how like mentally unstable he is throughout the entire thing. That's what I absolutely love.
Yes. But I mean, nothing is like as shocking in that movie as it was back in the day, because like the original one where it's like, man, Mrs. Bates is killing all these people. And then it's like, boom, it was Norman the whole time. Is such a mind fuck back then, and even still today. Like if you never have heard of the movie or you watch it or whatever, it's like, oh my god, that is genius.
Yeah,
but then you see it now, like trying to be done today's standards, it's not as captivating unless you do like Sleepaway Camp.
Yeah, and like that's what I liked about the old horror movies that were kind of like in more in the suspense genre, like Psycho, was that they had those classic misdirects that kind of like cued in what today's standard of a misdirect is. It's like, haha, it was me the whole time.
Yeah,
and you're like,
you get that originality of this is how it started.
Yes.
Like, oh, I could see this is where these tropes started coming into play.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, to me, if someone's like, hey, I'm about to put on this cheesy movie from the 80s, I'll sit down and like horror movie from the 80s, I'll still sit down and watch it because I love Poltergeist, I love The Exorcist, I love the original Friday the 13th Part 2. I'm not a big fan of number 1 just because of like it had.
But that's also a prime example of the whole reveal where it's like, oh my god, this Jason character's killing everybody, and then it's like, oh shit, it's his mother, you know?
Yeah, and then there was another movie, I can't remember, I can never remember the name of it, but it was where it was about a camp, and at the end of the movie, this is from like the 70s or 80s, early 80s, late 70s, where the killer turned out to be a boy at an all-girls camp, and at the end of it, they show him standing there naked, and he's just smiling.
Camp. That's Sleepaway Camp.
I thank you. I forgot that was Sleepaway Camp. I really did.
That's what I was saying. That's a prime example of like the whole big old reveal where it's like, oh fuck.
Yeah, and he's just turned around. He's
just standing in the field. And it's so good.
It really is, and like by today's standards, is it a cinematic masterpiece? No, but back then,
but it was terrifying. It was creepy. Yeah. It was. I mean, hell. We even go back to like creature features. Some of my favorite things. Like I love the creature from Black Lagoon. You can even do like the monster movies, Frankenstein, Dracula, Wolfman, The Mummy. Absolutely love those. But like another prime example of like where you can see how cheesy but effective they can be is, again, for me personally, it was like growing up was watching the first 2 Tremors, for example.
I love the Tremors franchise.
I love that. So do I. As bad as it got, but I love those movies. Like the first one though was like, it was like, what if we tried doing like prehistoric things, but what if it was something that was completely underground and, you know, just pops out of nowhere? It's like, that's a terrifying thing. Is it turning out some spots? Yes. But then showing that evolution of how those stages can go from movie to movie in a sense is really, really interesting to me.
Yeah, I think
how it starts, like when you go back to like the brain that wouldn't die, or the thing from another planet, the Blob, the Thing in general. I apologize for the train in the background.
Oh no, you're fine. But I like the one thing that I love about the original. I like, because I will say that the original three Tremors are my favorite of the whole Tremors franchise, due to the fact that
past the 4th one, but no, the thing I don't like about 3 is ass blasters. But
that's why I love number 3, is because of the ass blasters. It's like I use that term all the time whenever I'm about to whenever I have like a little bit of digestion issues and it's like, oh, I'm really gassy. It's like, oh god, it's ass blasters.
Oh no, ass blasters coming.
It's the kind that can like clear out a room, and I use that as a reference. And every once in a while, someone will catch it. Someone will catch it, and they'll be like, Tremors, and I'm like, Tremors, and they're just like, oh god, the smell.
Yeah. Oh no, it has its moments, but it's like that's prime example of like how you can see that transition as well. Because I mean, there's still like genuinely horror movies that are creature-esque, like Jaws is a prime example of like that movie terrified the fuck out of people. Like beaches were dead for like I think weeks or months after that movie came out.
You ever seen a shark's eyes? They're lifeless, black, like a doll's eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, we got so many untapped at the time. Jaws gave us so many untapped phobias that people didn't even know that they had. Like I'm I'm scared of open water if I can't see the bottom of it. Genuinely terrified. If my feet are touching the bottom, I'm good. Like as long as my feet are touching the bottom, I'm good. But the moment that I start to not be able to see where my feet are, I start to freak out and I start to think, oh, what if I step on a rockfish? What if I step on a sea urchin?
It's like I have this conversation with my wife sometimes where it's like, how can you fear that ocean? It's so beautiful and so on and so forth. And she's like, you don't know what's below you. You don't know what's going to happen.
Exactly.
And it's like the whole being a kid, you know, this pool is very deep. There's a shark in there. It's that mindset of just not knowing what's in there and not knowing anything is like more terrifying than, there's nothing really to worry about.
Yeah. And like that kind of ties into the Are You Afraid of the Dark from the 90s that aired on Nickelodeon.
Oh yeah.
Like they brought in a lot of those tropes. Yes. I love
Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Yes.
Tales from the Crypt.
Yes.
Outer Limits, X-Files, like all that stuff. Like just did so much, especially like it really set in younger audiences to the horror that was before, is, and would come to be, because I feel like there's some episodes or some books or stories from them that like really fucked with kids more than they intended to.
Yeah.
Like Coraline, the book, was not supposed to be a children's book, but the person who ended up, I can't remember the writer off the top of my head, but when he went to the company, the head person of the company was like, if my daughter enjoys it or whatever, we'll make it a kid's book, but this doesn't seem like a kid's book. And his daughter refused to say how scary it was because she wanted it to be made into like the book and see how like everyone else to experience. But it's a fucking terrifying book.
It really is. Good. It really, really is. And it's not a big book. Like
no, it's not.
I went to Books A Million today and I got a horror book. It's called Ghost Story. It's written by Peter Straub, not sponsored, not asked to plug this book or anything like this, but it caught my eye, and it's a pretty thick book, but like Coraline's maybe like a quarter of this book.
Yeah. But it's a fantastic book. I love that book.
I think it barely breaks 150 pages. I think it's like 210 at most, but it's still.
I don't remember, but it's fantastic. It's one of my favorite movies. It is just done so well. It's so unnerving, but it's so good.
Yeah, because I mean because they describe the button eyes a little bit different in the book, if I remember correctly, and it's
it's a little bit more graphic, But it's like that's what like, we get this mindset, because I mean you see a lot of that with older horror movies, like again, like we were talking about, where it's like you don't really have the makeup effects that you do today, where it actually looks like they stitched or cut open and so on and so forth. So you really have just like these blobs of blood, or like really no wounds. Even like with the Wolfman, it's like you don't even see him tearing out throats or anything. You just see him like kind of pounce on them. That body's still seen off screen kind of thing, but you know they're dead. And there's like very minimal blood. And to expand that later on, when they would do like Bride of Frankenstein, you see more of that graphic stuff, and a little bit more, not as graphic as today or bloody or whatever, but you slowly see that transition. Even with like Dracula, most of the time you see him just bite someone's neck and the person falls over and they're dead kind of thing, but you don't really see like blood on his mouth or whatever. If you do, it's like a little bit right here. And then you go to like The Curse of Dracula with Christopher Lee, where it's more predominant, more visual.
I love that. I loved his portrayal of Dracula. He did such a good job. I miss Christopher Lee. He was such an amazing actor.
He's done so much with his career. I mean, it's also with like Dracula's Brides and so on and so forth too, where like you can start to see it expand and get either A, more silly, or B, like actually I was talking, or more graphic and just overdone in the same hold. Like me and my wife were talking about, I think it was today or yesterday. We were talking about Leprechaun as one of those series that went to space.
It was like, because let's see, Jason did it, Leprechaun did it, Hellraiser did it, which they kind of did it as a way to end it, but then they brought it back again, and it was it was a little confusing, to be honest, because they were like, oh no, they built a reverse laminate that kills the Cenobites, and then they made another one right after that was like 1,000 years in the past, and you're just like, but why? But why?
But why? Yeah, no, I feel that. it can go a lot of ways with that. I mean, I don't see space as being like the game ruiner, but it's like there is definitely ridiculous. I personally like my stuff more grounded, and that's what makes it more terrifying. It's like more grounded in reality. Like that's why I think what is it? Wolf Creek is like so terrifying to like because
that was based on a true story too.
Thing. Yeah, that's more terrifying. Strangers, obviously, but I don't find that specific situation or movie. I don't find that movie terrifying, but I find that situation in general, yes, that is terrifying.
Yeah.
The Purge, if done properly, I understand that being terrifying and so on and so forth. But like the ones that are more grounded in reality like that, or even hell, if you want to take them like outside the extreme, like Hills Have Eyes, like that is also like a terrifying fact, you know? Not
like I think there's areas in like rural America that are like that, but where you're like, I don't want to stop here. I don't want to stop here at all.
Hey, you know, I'm not saying or putting a label on this state or wherever I'm at that this is the situation, but I'm getting very strong vibes.
It's like, it's like, hey, I'm cruising through unnamed state that's kind of backwoods in this area. I'm not stopping for gas. I'm gonna go until I'm close to empty, a little ways up the way, and maybe
if we find a town, great. Otherwise, this is where we die.
Yeah. And like one thing that I do really loved about like coming out, like, because me and you are from the same generation as far as like, you know, like age. We're around the same age. And what I loved about being a 90s kid was the fact that we had really good horror that was only PG-13, and it didn't need to exceed that. Whereas like now they try to chase R rating, which is understandable in some instances. It gives them a little bit more room to be, you know, a little more gory. Whereas like back in the 20s, 30s, 40s, before they invented like even sound.
And I would say even also before they even had a rating, because like, very, I mean, hell, you got to remember, I think it was Indiana Jones, The Temple of Doom was like the first PG-13 movie ever. Jaws is PG.
Yeah. Like back in like the old silent films though, like the way that they showed a death, quote unquote, was that they would do the classic faint scene where like they throw their hand on their head and they would fall backwards. Like even the guys were just like, and it was, that was the
like dramatic scene. Death. It is a very dramatic death to show, yes, they are in fact dead. And that's what made it, again, it was the whole like, if you do that today's standards, it's like, oh my God, this is so bad. But that was how the standard was back then. And you can see that evolution. I mean, even now, like you can watch most 80s, 90s movies that were considered Academy Award, and you watch them today compared to like Academy Award ones now, you can see how even acting itself has changed, even just from a small few year gap in the 80s and 90s, if you want to do that. But it's still like that, seeing that transition and seeing those things is why I love the grounding of the original horror movies, is because seeing how terrifying with simplistic things was, and how we've evolved to needing to be, for me specifically, like of how graphic and gory and so on and so forth. Because I'm the kind of person that's like, I'd rather all my horror movies be R, so they don't have to hold back and or refrain from pushing that boundary in a sense.
Because if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Poltergeist was rated R. I'm gonna look that up real quick.
I think it's like PG-13 or some shit like that.
That's how you spell it.
But like that's for me specifically. But I also know like companies and so on and so forth don't sell as much and blah 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 blah. But I love when it's a very very hard R movie where you know it's like, wow, I'm surprised they allowed this to be in theaters.
It was because like, I mean, you have like Cannibal Holocaust, because like that spurred controversy, but it was so groundbreaking that they actually had the guy that was the director and writer come in and prove that the people that were in the movie were still alive.
Yeah, in court you had to do that because that was the first type of that film. Well, one of the firsts. Because it was very, very concerning. I mean, it's like when the promotion for Blair Witch was the same thing in the 90s, where everyone thought that this was legitimate. This was the found footage that someone had found. It was like, hey, we're trying to honor these students. This is what happened. And then it started this whole thing. And obviously it wasn't that way, but that's how it started. Like it was that idea of like, what if this was real? Like, I know they're saying it's fake, but this could be very, very real. And this is that subtlety of it. Like Green Inferno, like being a cannibal movie as well, is the same concept of that. Like just that in general is a very, very real thing in today's standards. I think there are tribes that we know of still around that are very hostile that way. And it's like, yeah. And that's a terrifying. See, when it's grounded in reality like that, that's what's terrifying to me. Because it's like, hey, what if this plane went down on one of these islands? That's a very real situation. Maybe a very small percentage, but it's a very real situation that can happen.
Yeah. Like the what if, like the what if thing of what if I'm the last person left on Earth because of some freak accident like that kind of like the grounded in reality fear, I feel is very justifiable. Jaws, some of the scenarios from Twilight Zone. Yeah, true.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, because like you're saying, like Last Man on Earth, but it's like I Am Legend. He thought he was alone, but then there happened to be other survivors. But it's like that thought process of like, what if I, being this single thing left on this planet, is a terrifying thought. I'm alone with my own thoughts and stuff. Would you want to continue to live, or would you want to die? Like, because it's like, there's so many different variables you have to take, but it's like, look, I could do whatever I want when I want, but I'm alone. I have no one with me, not even a pet or anything like this. You know, it's like, there's so much in the negative for me in my head to be like, oh, yeah, I don't want to stay here. But then there's also so much where it's like, we can start a new history, or you're starting something new and can like see nature fully go back to itself and, you know, see the plague that is mankind erased.
Yeah. So I did look up the rating for Poltergeist. The MPAA, which is the National Rating Society, I guess you could say, for Poltergeist. Like initially, Poltergeist initially received an R rating from the MPAA. Steven Spielberg and Tobe Hooper disagreed with the R rating and succeeded in having it changed to a PG on appeal. So I'm actually surprised that it received. I understand, but I'm surprised that it initially received an R rating. But I'm thinking by today's standards. I'm not thinking by 1982.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say, because you got to remember, back in those days, you barely had your Halloweens out. Because Halloween came out in what, 77? I think 77,
70, around that.
So 4 or 5 years after that, that was already considered a very scary graphic movie. Friday the 13th was about to be made soonish, if not already. There's so many things that.
I think the first one came out in 80, and then the second one came out 82 or 83 ish,
something like that. Yeah, because I know Freddy was like 84 or 86.
Yeah.
But it's like still not very, very graphic. But when you watch the Poltergeist, it is in some parts very graphic for what the audience was used to. I mean, like, even if you look at The Exorcist, there's so many things from the 70s that like terrified everybody. And you can see, I mean, everyone talks about the head spinning and the puke and all that. The things that like I found more terrifying was like her coming back down the stairs wasn't terrifying.
Yes,
the fact that just spits out the blood. It was just like, that was not expected. Like seeing the priest get possessed is a whole nother slap in the face too, where it's like, holy shit, that would happen. And that's more terrifying than the whole movie, in my opinion.
Yeah. where he's just like the part that sold me on the original Exorcist was the whole her doing the backwards walk going downstairs, because there's no wires, there's no safety equipment. It's an actual contortionist doing that. And it's like practicality goes a long way with me in a lot of instances. I know you can't do practical effects on everything. Like, oh no, my head is splitting into two and we want to add in some CGI on this side to make it kind of look a little bit more.
Well, I mean, like the transitions, even with like in the old classic films with like Wolfman and in general, is like when it was the full moon, like today's standards, you see either a CG transformation or something like that. Back then, it was literally shot, a little bit more hair, shot, and you see that wolf and makeup slowly overtake, and then he is the Wolfman, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like it is today's standards. I mean, like one of my prime examples, like my favorite werewolf transformation I'll use is American Werewolf in London. Like,
yes.
The prosthetics and the animatronics that they used to do that and the sound effects is so good.
It
seeing
is.
him like just stand there looking at his hand, and then you just see this whole section just elongate and stretch, and it's just like that animatronics and prosthetics is not something that they had 20-30 years ago. And seeing that small transitions like that is what makes it more horrifying, because it is more real. And that's what I love about the older movies, is that it felt real like that.
Yeah, I have to agree. And also on top of that, like the thing that I loved about American Werewolf in London and American Werewolf in France, I think
Paris,
it was.
yeah,
Paris.
I hated that one so bad, so much CG.
There was, but the thing that I loved about both of them was the audiography, I guess you could say, of the transformation, because like you'd hear his human voice slowly become the beast.
Monster. Yeah. No, see, that's always where my audiophile for horror comes out, is that aspect of seeing or hearing that stuff. Like I said, that to me is what makes me love horror, is that sound effect, that sound visual of seeing the chaos or the horror, the graphicness of it. I absolutely like live for that. And that's why I usually scare like my wife or friends or whatever, because I love those things a little too much, apparently.
It's just like, oh, that sounded so amazing. It's like, oh, his bones are crunching. I know, but still.
No, it's not like that. It's like more of, have you seen Smile yet?
I've seen bits and pieces of it online, but I have not watched the full thing yet.
Okay, so I won't spoil anything, but there is a scene towards the end, and the way it's done is the way you see the flesh peel is all I'm going to say. Is how it sounds and how it looks. I gushed over and kept on talking about it forever, and my wife was just like, "You're gonna have to stop talking about that right now." I was like, "Why? I'm just loving this for the fact that," she goes, "You're sounding very serial killer right now." I was like, I don't see that, but okay. She's like, it's kind of concerning. I was like, okay, well, I'll stop about it. But like stuff like that for me is what I love.
I love like one thing that I truly, and I know this isn't considered, classic horror, but the reason why I loved Tales from the Crypt was because it was kind of like, what if we took I guess you could say a child's wonder and then turned it upside down, because there was one episode that aired every Christmas in the 90s where Santa came in, and Santa was this evil person. Didn't hurt the kid whatsoever. Just the kid let the Santa inside the house after the parents had been listening to police reports on the radio back when we didn't have XM and digital phone and cell phones in our pockets, where we could Google this stuff and get constant media updates on every 10 seconds. This was like back when you had to listen to the news on the radio, the TV, and you only had like 3 channels.
TV guy to make sure you don't miss your show.
Yeah. Like, oh, I gotta be done with my homework at 6 because this comes on at 7, and then this comes on at 8, and then if I miss that, then I have to watch this at 9, and then I'm gonna be in bed by 10. It was like,
if I don't get if I can't watch this by 8 o'clock, or pre-recorded or recorded it and watch it before 8 o'clock kind of thing, I have to go to bed and I'm not able to watch it, and I'm gonna be sad.
Yeah. And like the kid
I was
didn't
say though, when you touched on Tales of the Crypt, like that's a very good like general horror into the extreme in a sense, because the way they did some of the things is very, very good. Especially for TV, is like very good for like the general audience to get scared. And that, I think, is fantastic. Like, as for me, one of my favorite movies that ever came from Tales from the Crypt is Demon Knight. I absolutely love that movie. I love that.
I've had enough of this shit and this little po dunk.
Billy Zane was so fucking good.
He was such a good demon. Like, I loved Billy Zane. That was such a good movie.
Like, that also goes back to being how graphic it can be, or how prosthetics, animatronics, because like his very end demon form and so on and so forth, or seeing like the demons themselves, like just makeup and so on and so forth. It's like shows how far it's come to where before, like if you watch the original Twilight Zone show, like the 50s and 60s one, like one of my favorite ones is the Howling Man. And
that is a good one.
Is subtle things of like, how do you show that this person's evil and so on and so forth? Do you give them horns? Like simple things like that is like, but that's so terrifying back then. It's like, this is horrifying. And I love that simplistic yet effective delivery.
And I have to say that the two versions of the Twilight Zone movie were actually really well done, because they did one in the 80s, as we discussed earlier before we started, and then they did the one in the 90s where they basically took verbatim what was done in the 80s
shot for shot, yeah,
and redid it in the 90s. And then we had I don't know if you remember this or not, but I still watch it every year, The Simpsons Treehouse of Horrors.
Oh yeah, see, I don't watch them anymore. I haven't watched the Simpsons episode in 10 years.
Yeah,
if that, maybe more. But no, I mean, that used to be a religious thing for me and my family. Yeah, it was every time it was getting close to Halloween and stuff, was watch the Simpsons horror marathons, or they'd do their well, they were still airing episodes, but they'd air their scariest episodes of like the X-Files or the Outer Limits and so on and so forth. Like those like simplistic times, but yet effective horror aspects for the general audience. I think like because there's only one episode I think of X-Files that only aired once, and they showed it maybe a couple other times, which was the Inbred episode.
Oh yeah,
which was a very, very good episode, a very terrifying episode. But it's like you could still see those limits being pushed even back then.
Yeah, I remember bits and
refreshing
pieces of that episode, because I'm sorry, without the Bela Lugosi's, without the friggin' Bram Stokers, without Mary Shelley's, like we wouldn't have the X-Files, because the X-Files wasn't just about extraterrestrials. It made it
legends, because I mean they did it like the Jersey Devil at parts. They did it,
like Mothman,
yeah, a bunch of stuff like that, and it's very, very good and effective for its time. But like for me, it's like if we didn't have like the amazing writers or people that are willing to push those limits, or the demented minds, if you want to say in some senses, we wouldn't be blessed with all these like amazing films.
Yeah, there is one gripe that I have about like any zombie movie ever made, is that they don't have any basic knowledge of zombies in whatever universe they're in. Walking Dead, any George Romero's zombies, anything like that. They've like, and on top of that, they're never ever called zombies in the movies. They're called walkers. They're like
but zombie-esque things in general. Yeah, no, I know.
Yeah.
What you mean. For me, my biggest problem is that like everyone's always like, hey, if we don't move to a military base, we're not going to survive, or if we don't stick together, we're not going to survive. It's like there's plenty of instances, and there's a lot of other ways that you can really look at it in a sense. But the thing that always bothers me with zombie movies is just how they make it seem like after months of this or whatever, like it's been like Last of Us is a prime example of it, where it's like 20 years later, I fully understand being that chaotic. I fully understand.
Yeah.
But when they're like Dawn of the Dead, where it just happens and so on and so forth, it's like so much would be happening in such a short time that you wouldn't even really be able to get from point A to point B, no matter what way you look at it.
Yeah.
When a disaster like that happens, or anything like that happens, like that's why one of the reasons why I also don't like disaster movies. It's like, oh, if we're in this area, we're magically safe. It's like, it's not how this shit works. When disaster happens, disaster's not fucking biased. Everything is on the table.
Yeah. And on top of that, they don't take into account for like actual human panic. They're like, oh, we've got enough space for everyone in this general vicinity. No.
Human panic. You know how many people are being trampled or ran over? It doesn't matter what the situation is, especially in a zombie apocalypse kind of thing. Like my biggest thing is like the whole like with like Walking Dead, for example, like Rick being in the coma, whatever, and the outbreak happening, and Shane putting the little gurney in front of him is. It's like I don't care if that was supposed to be even in a realistic sense. The man had not been taken care of for like months. He would have been dead.
Yeah, hands down. Because it was. Yeah. Because like you gotta constantly check his.
Yeah. Done.
Just like, because like I think when he wakes up, he pulls the IV out, which hadn't been changed out in forever, and it doesn't take a whole lot of air to get into your circulatory system to actually kill you. Don't ask how I know that.
I'll say not even that, but he figured like the rust buildup and so on and so forth from the needle itself, or any type of infection because no one's monitoring it. Blah blah blah. Lots of things. But that again, small complaint about me on that, or for me on that. But back to like the classic horror stuff. I do love how like it was fantasy, and you knew it was like fantasy because it's like unrealistic things were happening all the time. Especially like with some of the other ones. Like I had pulled up a quick little list over here on one of them. Was that like for me personally, like it was considered a horror movie back in the time, was the original King Kong. Like I
That
absolutely loved 1933 King Kong because for me, what made me love that movie is one of the first movies that really had the stop motion animation playing in the background while actors were simultaneously reacting and acting with said claymation.
yeah, and it was one of those ones that was kind of like what would happen if there was an actual like 50-foot gorilla unleashed in New York.
Wonder of the world or ninth wonder of the world. You know, it's like it's fantastic. I mean, I love Peter Jackson's retelling of that in the '08. It was fantastic, but like it can't compete, even though it's like 100-year difference. Actually, no, it'd be what 75-year difference, I guess. Yeah, 75-year difference from those two movies.
Yeah.
It's just it doesn't hit the same because like original King Kong was groundbreaking, whereas this one's just like a retelling of it, but it's done in a good way. And that's another thing too. For it's like that's why we were talking about the upcoming movies and so on and so forth with like the reboot of The Exorcist. My biggest concern is what groundbreaking thing are they going to do for it? Because like The Exorcist back in the 70s was groundbreaking because it's like how many films were really out that were Satan triumphing over God, you know?
Yeah. And like where they had the little girl floating, the bed shaking, her head spinning. Well. Yeah, I just pulled up a list of. I just typed in horror movie classics, and it has like a whole bunch. And for some reason, they have Scary Movie on there. I'll touch on
just a generalized from all the years.
Yeah, and like I'm looking at it, and I didn't know this, but I should have assumed this. The Lost Boys.
Oh yeah, I love that movie. That's what I was actually talking about that yesterday with my family. It's like that's one of my favorite Kiefer Sutherland movies ever. I love that movie.
Yes, and I love how they took the aspect of the vampire and just kind of revamped it to match not just the lifestyle that they would have to maintain, but the era
being in the 80s too. Yeah, I was gonna say maintaining that 80s feel with like that classic vampire story in a sense, and those tropes of like being invited in and all. It's so good. It is fantastic.
Yes. It's a must see, must watch for anyone that has never seen it. It's old. It's
nice and bloody in the good ways. Oh, so good.
And here's the best part about the original Lost Boys. Don't go down the tube of watching the spinoffs because there's the sequels.
Yeah, it was The Tribe and Blood Ritual or something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's not. They're not that great. I watched them just because I'm a diehard fan of it, and I was curious.
I need to watch them just for Corey more than anything.
Yeah, Corey was in all of them, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was. But even though the movie is based in the 80s and it's going on 50 years old now, it is still like the effects aren't dated even by today's standards. And as far as like,
for the most part, there's a couple scenes I think that would be considered dated, but like for the most part, it's like it's very practical, very one shot, very good not one shot. I shouldn't say that. But very good at like doing its effects and its horror without really risking anything. Like it does it very, very well. It's a fantastic movie. Same with like John Carpenter's Vampires. It's done also the same way. It's like they hold up to today's standards as far as not really CGI heavy and ruining a lot. And it's done. You can watch that movie and still be like, yeah, this can still be used for today. Like, yeah, you can definitely show someone today that's never really watched too much horror and still terrify the fuck out of them.
Yeah. Because all in all, it was a great movie just for the simple fact that it was a retelling of like a classic fear that humans have had for centuries. Like, I mean, I know we've had, we've had a bunch of different retellings of vampires and all that fun stuff, but it was just one of those ones where it was, oh God, Reanimator. Oh.
I love Reanimator. Like Cronenberg films in general, I love. Body horror is one of my favorite genres just because I love seeing fucked up things. That's why I like Videodrome is one of my favorites. And The Thing is one of my favorites. The Fly with Jeff Goldblum is one of my favorite movies. Like it is just, I love body horror. It is done so well. It is so graphic and it's so fucked up.
I have to agree. But yeah, like it was like a dated version of a horror movie from the 80s, I would honestly have to say, is Fright Night. I liked the remake.
Creep shows are so good. Oh my God.
I love them all. But like the practical effects in those ones are very dated, but like for the Lost Boys, it still holds up to today's standards. And like as much as I love Fright Night and Creepshow, some of their practical effects are dated. Some of the makeup, just doesn't work
To be
by
silly and
today.
whatnot.
Yeah.
Like it's still like it risked something. It tried
Yes.
something. That's what I like, especially like with I think it's Creepshow 2 where the dude who meets the gargoyle and he's not supposed to tell anybody, so he ends up telling his wife, and his wife and kids turn into a gargoyle and kill him, and then spend the rest of their days like on a balcony. Like it's like it sounds cheesy and whatnot, whatever. But the makeup effects that you see when they do it is so good. Oh,
yes.
I love it.
Yes, I have to agree. But like Fright Night, I liked the original, and I liked the remake with Colin Farrell. I
did too.
It was like that's a good version of a remake being done right, in my personal opinion, because it's like
that was actually my first introduction to David Tennant ever. I had never really seen anything with him in it.
Really?
I'm not a Doctor Who person, so I don't know who the hell he was. And then when one of my exes I was dating at the time was just like, "Oh yeah, that's one of the Doctor Who's." I was like, "Who the fuck is Doctor Who?" I've never heard of Doctor Who until like 12 years ago, some shit like that.
Yeah,
so it was really funny.
And believe it or not, there's even some aspects of Doctor Who I would consider horror-esque.
I mean, well, you're Weeping Angels for sure. Like,
yeah, oh my god, yes.
Like, I mean, how I can't
blink.
Yeah, the Daleks can be considered in some aspects. I mean, especially being like a genocidal fucking robot species. Yeah, no, I fully understand. I don't remember what they're called. I know they're in Doctor Who, though. The aliens that you remember everything as you're looking at them and talking to them, but once you look away, you have no recollection of them. Those things are also very, very horrifying if brought in even like the horror world.
I think that's kind of funny because you're like, I can't remember what they're called, but when you're looking at them, you remember everything. It's like, I think it worked.
Exactly. Like, I'm looking at one right now. Oh, what?
That was like that episode of Buffy from the 90s. Like if you've never watched the original Buffy the Vampire Slayer movie from the 80s or the show from the 90s, both are cheesy, quote unquote, by today's standards.
TV horrors, but they're still good.
Good. Yeah. And one of my favorite episodes is where one of my favorite episodes is where she meets the I forget what they're called, but they're the guys that are quiet. I think they're like quiet guys or something like that, where like they've got like really big grins, and like their thing is they go like this, and as soon as they like leave your sight, you forget about them. But Buffy remembers them, and they appear in a couple of episodes, and she has to fight him in one of the episodes, but she can't remember how to defeat him from before, and that's what like makes them terrifying, is because you forget about them as soon as they're like gone.
Yeah, out of sight, out of mind. You're literally forget. But that's also, like I said, one of the tropes that I also loved that happened in the 50s with classic horror is the atom bomb. When the atom bombs drop, it mutates all of its life around it. I mean, that's where we got our Godzilla. We got our them, Tarantula, all these things where they're playing with gamma radiation, whatever, all this other fun jazz. But that's where like real love for like the creature features really came, because it's like super ridiculous but great. Yeah,
and another one that this is my gripe about today's horror. There's not a lot of risks being taken with horror
because most of it's been done, unfortunately. But even when you do find something new, I feel like it's more of like your creepypastas, like we were talking about earlier, or like your Slendermans and stuff like that. Like it's like more, what could I do as a one-shot story? But I don't find them as terrifying because they seem very, very basic in a sense.
Yeah,
it's like it is something new, but like when it comes to nowadays groundbreaking, is going to be very, very hard, because it's either going to be something visually or it's going to be something that's story related, because we've already got so many different iterations in all of our horror that it's almost like verbatim of like what to expect. Again, like we talk about our audio cues and certain jump scares and all this other stuff, the unsettling feelings, you can feel them coming on in most of the movies.
I feel like the most of the ones that tried something and it worked were the original Saws, like we've talked about, the Insidiouses, the Sinisters, like those ones tried something new. Those ones took the risks, and it paid off for them. Whereas like if you were to come out with a zombie movie today, it wouldn't be the same as Romero's. It wouldn't be the same as.
Well, I'm so happy right now. We are far away from zombie movies. So happy
Yes.
because they were a dime a dozen happening there for a while, and I was so fucking tired of them.
Like we spent a good 10 years in the 2010s just dealing with, oh, this zombie movie is terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's like
Same basic shit like everywhere, and I'm so tired of zombies. But now it's like it's been a okay-ish break from zombies for me, where it's like I would kind of like to see something new with them, and or a different telling of a zombie movie.
Yeah, I would like to see what would happen if, you know, we had like different versions of zombies, not so much like the eat your brains kind, but like the sentient ones, the ones that are like actually like
Land of the Dead,
human
and so on
hunt.
and so forth.
Yeah.
Or if you want to do like, even if you want to say like quote unquote special zombies from like Left 4 Dead, or if you want to even do like the Resident Evil franchise with mutations and stuff like that, I could agree.
Yeah.
I would like to see, like, if we're talking classics and remakes and stuff like that too, it would be like 1967's Night of the Living Dead. I would like to see a very, very true verbatim remake of that, even in today's standards. I think would be fantastic. Like if you were to bring it into the modern world. I mean, because it was a modern movie at its time, but I mean, like today, now, I would like to see that.
Because they had that
concept.
They had the one zombie. Yeah. Because they had the one zombie. I forgot his name. I think his name was like Fred or something like that. He didn't eat any of the humans. He actually ended up saving them from a zombie.
Yeah, that was.
I'm sorry.
Because that's what the doctor was actually trying to train
reanimate
them to be.
Yeah,
they're training because they caught one and were talking to it. But no, I was talking about like the little girl in Night of the Living Dead, where she actually like, actively goes and picks up the what was it, the trowel, and starts stabbing her mom.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Like that kind of stuff. I was like, damn, I would love to see that today's standards.
One that I would like to see for today's standards, honestly, I just seen it where I just got it pulled up by the list. Where is it? Misery.
Misery would be an interesting one, but I mean, that one's kind of a little bit
psychological.
More, yeah, but it's also more fresh in today's standards. I mean, it's like,
yeah.
I mean, yeah, not really fresh, I'd say, because even still, Disturbia has another telling of that as well, which is an original telling of like Rear Window and so on and so forth.
I actually liked the movie Disturbia with Shia LaBeouf. It wasn't bad. It's
a good updated, but like even Rear Window was not one of my favorites. So I was like, it's all right. I mean, I understand the concept of it and how it could be terrifying, but it's just not for me.
You know, that's fair. I can agree.
Like, that's another prime example. Like, I know everyone loves Alfred Hitchcock. He's done all these like really great horror movies, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Not everything he has done that I loved.
Yeah, because sorry, I had to cough. But I wouldn't consider myself a big Alfred Hitchcock fan, but there's some movies of his that I did enjoy just because
it's mostly his cinematics and how he shoots things. I really love, but just because he does that very well does, I mean, I'm gonna love everything he does. Like, same with like M. Night Shyamalan, Spielberg. I've said this before. Lucas, I've said this before. They've done a lot of movies. I don't like every single one of the movies. There's some I even hate.
Yeah, like I like the original prequels of Star Wars, and I don't like today's Star Wars, not because they're like, oh, we made this really, great heroine. No, it's because they just wrote her poorly. Like they didn't give her the same kind of character development.
Well, that they gave everybody else. For me, also, what I feel like is that with some of their storytelling, and especially today's standards, I feel like they've also like retconned a lot of like the books that like was approved and or wanted, and so like there's just a lot of stuff that they kind of cut out or like made technically no longer canon, which kind of upsets me the most.
Because before Disney bought Lucasfilms, every book that was written that had Lucasfilm's stamp of approval on it was canon, but like
considered canon.
And there was so many great stories. Like they like, believe it or not, Star Wars has their own version of zombies that were kind of like Halo's The Flood, if you remember that. And I read that book. This was like back in like 2008 or 9, I think. And it was actually pretty terrifying. Like it was a whole squadron of clone troopers. This is pre-Clone Wars, pre-Episode 3 and all that fun stuff. I think it was right in between 1 and 2. I could be wrong, but a whole squadron of stormtroopers become the zombies, and then they're actively hunting the Jedi that was the general of their squadron. And the Jedi ended up not making it. This is like a 25 chapter book. It was a pretty lengthy book, but
I don't remember that one. I don't think I've read that one.
It was a pretty good read, and I'm kind of upset because could you imagine like a horror movie of Star Wars done in that aspect, like the zombies?
It'd be interesting. I mean, there's a lot of planets in general that you could just do the movie on itself. I mean,
yeah,
it'd be really, really good. I feel like a lot of space fiction, your Star Trek, Stargates, and all that, Star Wars, I feel like would be great in a horror aspect, but I feel like its popularity and fandom wouldn't see it that way. They love that more the sci-fi nerd or like intellect behind the shows, which I fully understand. But I love like some of their creature designs, and I would love to see like a horror aspect on a lot of it.
If I could retcon one character from any fandom, it's fucking Jar Jar Binks. I can't stand Jar Jar Binks.
Annoying as fuck, but I don't really see them as the problem. Like if I'm going to retcon anything from Star Wars, I want to fucking retcon the goddamn Ewoks. Oh my God, I fucking hate them.
I wouldn't retcon Jar Jar Binks out entirely. I would retcon him to be a secret Sith Lord, like the whole fan theory is, because it's just like
his eyes. Yeah. No, for me, I would get rid of the Ewoks. Don't get me wrong. I understand the bears are cannibals, whatever. Cool. They're little omnivore bastards and eat the stormtroopers. Cool. I don't give a shit. They're too cute and cuddly, and I'm so tired of seeing the cute and cuddly shit. It's like porgs in the new ones. I fucking hope they all die.
The fucking porgs. But yeah, like
that's just me. That's just my opinion.
But I mean, in all honesty, I mean, even with like Spielberg's great at like cinematics. He's not the best storyteller, but he's put out surprisingly, he's put out some.
It depends on what you want to tell on his stories aspects, because there's some that I will agree with you and some I will disagree with you on.
I'll go Poltergeist in this instance. Like he had a great storytelling aspect of that. Like his cinematics were friggin' phenomenal. But
no, I agree, and I'll give you another one that fits that same category of being like phenomenal and whatnot. But I hated, which was E.T. Visually and is done so well. Its story is actually very well told. It's not rushed. It doesn't feel like it's too cheesy in too many spots or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Now that being said, I fucking despise that movie.
That's fair. I liked it as a kid. Looking back at it, I'm like, it's not that great.
Well, no, I can still see how it holds up today, and I still see why a lot of people like love it and childhood memories or whatever have you. I fully understand. It's not for. I hated that movie so much. Like, I'm the kind of person that's like too family friendly in some senses. It like really makes me just hate things. I'm a very like, I don't know. I just like too much family friendly stuff. It just makes me like, it's like romance films. I'm not the biggest fan of it. It's very few do I love and whatnot, but like majority, I just not for me.
What was the movie? What was the movie that I love it to this day? The original version of it. Oh, what was it? Flatliners? Were they kind of
ringing a bell for me?
They're so basically like they it's a group of college kids, if I can remember this exactly. I kind of like the remake version of it. It wasn't too bad, but it wasn't like the old one. But I think it came out in the 90s or the 80s. I don't really remember the era that it came out. But basically, they go and do a science experiment to where they're like, hey, if I flatline for this amount of time, I go into a different world where I can see spirits. Well, they start to do this more and more. And as they do it more and more, the things that they see in the extra, I guess you could say that the other plane of existence are coming or bleeding over into our plane of existence. I want to say that's the Flatliners, but I can't remember.
Not ringing a bell to me, but it reminds me a lot of horror movies. I can kind of pinpoint and throw ideas that like kind of took that and ran with it. And like the Insidious franchise is a prime example that first popped into my head. You could even do Nightmare on Elm Street because, you know, Nancy bringing Freddy into the world and so on and so forth.
Yeah. I think that Flatliners, here we go. 1990. Okay, yeah. Here's a synopsis. 5 medical students experiment with near-death experiences until the dark consequences of past tragedies begin to jeopardize their lives. It's like I'm a big psychological horror fan because like nothing is worse because to me, my worst enemy and my best friend is my mind. If you can figure out a way to turn my mind against me to make me second guess myself, I hate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it's one of those things. It was directed by Schumacher. I love Schumacher. It has Kiefer Sutherland, Jevin,
50 with Schumacher, but yeah.
And like, I'm not the biggest Schumacher fan, but he did good on this one. If you haven't seen it, watch the original 1990 version. I wasn't the biggest fan of the 2017 remake just because it like they didn't do it verbatim. They tried to do their own thing with it and they made it fair, you know, but I love it for the fact that they made it their own thing, but I don't like the fact that they did it with the remake, you know.
Did you feel like they went too far from the source of it?
No, that wasn't necessarily the problem. It was that they kind of copy and pasted the characters because if I remember correctly, the remake, quote unquote, was supposed to be medical students in 2017 finding the notes from the original people from 1990 and trying to recreate their experiment, if I remember correctly. So they tried to do a remake that was technically a sequel kind of thing, and I didn't like that aspect of it.
They did the Scream. It's the requel.
yes. But yeah, like basically it has Kiefer Sutherland, Kevin Bacon, and Julia Roberts in it. It's a great movie, and
that's a pretty good cast right there.
Yeah, and this is Julia. I think this is Julia Roberts post Pretty Lady.
It probably should be post, yeah, because Pretty Woman came out like in the 80s, I think.
Pretty Woman, yeah. And so this is like her kind of getting her feet wet and trying to figure out who she is. So she like it's a great movie. Totally. It's not it's dated by today's standards for like the effects and stuff, but it like
that's not gonna stop me.
If you go into it trying to enjoy it, and I it's on Prime. You can rent it for $4, but I highly recommend it because I'm a big psychological horror fan because like that's what made me love Oculus so much was because
that's such a good paranormal psychological horror film. Me and my wife like praise Oculus, but that's also where she comes in and tells me I should start watching The Haunting of Hill House or whatever it was and Bly Manor because it's all by the same person.
Those two I hold in the regard of them being quote unquote modern day classics because they're the ones that are kind of taking a risk because
that's what I've heard. I've heard the same thing, but I also feel like if I don't like it, I'm going to make so many people upset. So I'm kind of like postponing that for as long as possible.
Don't go into it based. This is my recommendation for anyone else out there that has access to The Haunting on Hill House. Don't go into it expecting it to just kind of grip you right away. Don't do that.
It's a series, so I already know there's gonna be a lot of slow progressions and so on and so forth.
Well, yes and no, kind of. Don't go into it expecting it to just kind of like rip you out of your seat with the horror. Like go into it expecting a slow burn, and you won't be disappointed. It's
not. If I am disappointed, I'm blaming you.
It's not bad. You're not gonna love the whole thing because I don't love the whole thing. I do love it, but it's one of those ones where I'm kind of like it's a little nitpicky here and there to where I'm like, wait, how does that tie? Okay, this episode adds that. So what about this? Okay, that episode adds that. It's just like as I'm asking the questions.
The main reason I think I'm really excited is because I like how Flanagan shoots and like commands certain scenes with his directing and his guidance. Like he does such a good job with that. Like there's so many shots that like me and my wife just like praise on just how visually everything looks. Even if it's like small, like 5-frame things or like a good 2-minute section, like just the way he has his setup with the cinematography of like how that camera is just positioning of everything is so good.
Yes.
So that's why I'm like excited to. It's just, I'm the kind of person, again, if it's something popular and like 90% of the time in my head, it's already going to be bad.
I will praise it for the fact that it does a combination of practical effects and CGI, but the CGI that they do is not bad. It's nothing like I hate to bring this up. I know this is a sore spot for you. But it's nothing like The Thing 2. They're the
Oh, the
prequel.
prequel and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nothing
so-
like that.
There's always a running gag with me and my wife when it comes to the prequel, The Thing. Number one is always at the very end. She's just like, how come they could not get a standard husky to look exactly the same from the first one? They're standard issues. And it's like, it's a standard issue husky. I did not realize that they had standard issue huskies. They have standard breeds, but it's a standard issued one. Everyone gets issued this husky.
Like, where do I get the standard issued husky?
Oh, yeah. But yeah, no, the CG in that movie, it's fine for what it is. I understand it being in the movie, but like it is, I would rather have had my practical effects.
It's not like the how to describe this without giving away spoilers. The branching scene where he's like, it's not like that. It's
yeah, like that's one of the things. Like if you watch the behind the scenes ever of the prequel, you get to see some of those animatronics and prosthetics and stuff, and it looks so good. But
yeah,
the director was all, oh no, it looks too 80s. It's like, that's what we wanted.
Yeah, and that's kind of where he was like, I realized I messed up after it hit cinema.
After it was done. Yeah,
because I remember watching an interview on him. I forgot what movie it was on. It wasn't on The Thing too, but he was like, hey, like the interviewer was like, hey, if you could go back and redo something. They were like, hey, can you, if you did, yeah, it was essentially in a sense, but like I think the actual question was like, if you could go back and fix something that you regret, what would it be? He's like, oh, the Thing too, the prequel. He's like, I would go back and reuse the animatronics over the CGI because like by that time they had already spent the money on the animatronics and he actively chose not to use it. And it was like, but why?
Yeah, no, I would agree with that as well. But yeah, I mean, when we go back to like even so with the classics and stuff like that, it's there's just something more passionate, I still say, about those ones compared to a lot more, because like you get a lot of like joking movies like Sharknado and stuff that just do shit. But the love for the older films was so much better, like in my opinion. Like I just they are appreciated by today's standards.
Yes.
Not in their time though. Then their time it was like, you watch this, you a sinner, you a bad person.
Yeah. Like I think The Shining was one of those movies to where like, again, this goes back on me being biased towards psychological horror. Was it that like and Dr. Sleep later on confirms that it was the ghost. This isn't a spoiler or anything like that. I think it's a 40-year-old book. So
yeah, it's older than that, but yeah, I get you.
But like The Shining was like that. Is it Jack going crazy or is it him actually seeing the ghosts? It turns out it was the hotel as itself. The hotel itself was evil. And like Dr. Sleep confirms this. Please don't shoot the messenger on this instance. It's a 40, 50-year-old book. And you can read The Shining and Dr. Sleep. I seen him today at Books A Million. Again, not sponsored, but if Books A Million wanted to do a sponsorship, I'm just saying. But yeah, like The Shining in its time, I remember there was like a protest about the scene where he stabbed the gardener, or not the gardener, the groundskeeper, because he came to rescue little what was the kid's name? Billy? I think it was Billy.
I don't know. It's been years since I've seen The Shining, and I haven't seen Dr. Sleep yet.
Dr. Sleep it's a good movie. It does a lot of practical effects, like it did in the first one, and it like brings out some of it. Well, actually, I think about a solid 99% of the movie is entirely practical effects, makeup, and stuff like that.
Like I said, that's not the main thing that will sell me on a film, but like I do love knowing that, because again, biasism is like, I love practical effects. I like seeing, obviously they're fake things, but like a fake thing really alive in a sense, like the animatronics on the Jurassic Park sets and stuff like that. Like that stuff to me, it brings me joy.
The original guy in the alien suit.
Yeah, being an actual guy in a suit is like, it's a real thing, but it's not real in that sense. Like just knowing that there's a suit or an animatronic that's like that. Same with American Wolf in London, where they have the upper body piece of the wolf pretty much as an animatronic to move it in certain areas in certain ways.
Yeah, and that one was groundbreaking. That one was groundbreaking as far as like werewolf movies, because we got a break away from the Wolfman, because we had just come fresh off of oh God, what was that?
If we're talking werewolf movies specifically,
I think it was The Brood. Or no, The Brood came out after Werewolf in London. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because Werewolf in London is like 74, I think, or 76.
Yeah, so we were just fresh off of the Wolfman essentially.
Well, Wolfman was like 19. Well, depends on which Wolfman we're talking about. If we're talking about the OG one, I think it is like 33. I'm a fucking look that up now because it's gonna bug me.
The one that came out in like, I think it was like 66. That was supposed to be a retelling of the OG, where it actually had like sound and stuff. Because I think the original one did.
Yeah, because 41 was 41. 41, I was right. 41 because that was Lon Chaney Jr. Lon Chaney Sr. was in Phantom of the Opera, which was 1926 or 27.
Now the original Phantom of the Opera, I liked because they actually made him look disfigured. I didn't like. I liked
the Lon Chaney Sr.'s makeup effects. That's one of the things that made me love it. He like envisioned that, and that terrified a shitload of people. It was fantastic.
Yeah. And I like the fact that like it was, again, like I'm a big, just like Miz, I'm a big practical effects type of guy where it's like, oh hey, this severed arm is gonna spray blood and the blood is gonna be, syrup, but it's still gonna be practical effects.
Yeah, it's effective. I mean, like chocolate syrup was Alfred Hitchcock's thing, but back then you wouldn't even known.
What was the movie that I watched where it was like, I forget what it was. It was like really bloody, but it was like they used the corn syrup, the clear corn syrup with a little bit of food dye. I want to say that was American Werewolf in Paris.
I don't remember, but I know which one you're talking about. But yeah, when it comes to like The Howling is one that I know a lot of people praise more than anything. I
forgot about The Howling.
I'm not a fan of The Howling. Apparently it was 81 actually is when American Werewolf in London was in. The Howling is considered the better transformation. I just don't like how it looks visually personally.
Yeah.
That's all. Sound effect wise was great. Everything else is fine with it. It's just I prefer American Werewolf in London. Yeah,
that was the one I was thinking of. It wasn't The Brood. I'm sorry. It was Howling. But like the one thing that I actually love is if you can get your hands on the director's cut of American Werewolf in London, they show the stunt coordinator trying on the torso, and he's like a 5 foot. He's like 5'5" or 5'6". He's a shorter dude. And he's trying on this thing that's supposed to be well over 7 feet tall, and all you can see is like his eyeballs and his legs, and then the arms are just like T-posing essentially. It looks hilarious.
It does, but it's fantastic. Oh my god,
so good. And big thing I didn't know until I watched a documentary on practical effects in Hollywood. I think that was the name of the documentary. I could be wrong. And they went into like horror movies, comedies, everything. And they were talking about how they get realistic looking hair for like animatronics and prosthetics. I did not know that was yak hair in a lot of instances because it's hypoallergenic and it doesn't itch.
Yeah, it's fantastic to use. I mean, most of the things that have like hair in any way, shape, or form that aren't like fuzzy fuzz, but like actual hair, like a Bigfoot or something like that. American Werewolf in London, anything that's like furry like that, they use a lot of yak hair because it grows fast. It's very easy to work with and not have a lot of issues.
Yeah, and it's super fine too, so that way you can have it be as furry or as hairy as possible
and sleek. Yeah, it's so good. It's so good.
And I think and American Werewolf in London was one of the progenitors, I want to say, for using the yak hair on like practical effects.
That I don't know. I know a lot of things about that movie, but that I don't know.
I think they used yak hair for that. I'm gonna check that real quick. But yeah, like practical effects for me go a long way in movies. Whereas that's why I like psychological horrors, because it's hard, very hard to flub up anything that has to do with psychological.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, especially in today's standards, I mean, there's a lot more movies that are really focused around the mental health and or mental psyche a lot more. I mean, Smile is a prime example for me of one of them. There's a lot of them that are just really, really good, and I think the way they are doing it, shooting it, and telling certain stories with it, it just is so good, especially by today's standards.
And they I keep praising. I keep saying Oculus is a good example of a psychological horror, but it really is.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say like Oculus is a very good example of like the psychological horror along with the paranormal, like blended so close together.
Yes.
Being able to like tell that story, it is done very, very well, and it's not like your typical, hey, this thing found us. It's like they searched for it so they could destroy, or she could destroy it, and it was like, hey, you're helping me close this family secret and or this family tragedy and so on and so forth. But it's done so well to the point where it's like it's constantly guessing. It's like, is it them? Is it the mirror? Like, what's going on here? Like, and the just that mindset of running of everything is so good.
Yep. It was like it played well in and of itself. I kind of wish we would have gotten a part 2.
I'm glad we didn't.
I'm glad we. Yeah, I was gonna say I'm glad we didn't.
I love that start, middle of everything to the end. Like everything they did with that was great. I'm happy with how it is.
Mm-hmm.
A sequel, I feel like, would kind of just do a whole new family or just try and continue their story, which I don't think would be as good.
Honestly, for a sequel, since we got so much of the back, and since we got so much of the general story of the mirror from that, I would have liked to seen the sequel actually be a prequel of how the mirror came to be, if done right. If it was the same team, same writers and everything that did it.
What? Like 140 years or something like that, because it's like in the like late 1800s, early 1900s that the mirror was, or it's like 1700s, something like that. It's an old ass mirror, but like they started recording the deaths in like the early 1900s and stuff. Like I'm also on the fence. Like I don't really personally like prequels as much because I rather see what we get and then continue, as opposed to like, this is what we got. Oh wait, let's do a background story for whatever fucking reason. I get tired of that personally. But that's just me. That's my take on things. I know a lot of people like prequels. A lot of people want to know background stories and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I do like backstories on certain things because, like, I'm like, aside from being a psychological type of horror guy, I do like having lore. Like, I'm a lore fanatic when it comes to certain aspects, like video games, comic books.
For me, it depends on the game itself, kind of thing. But no, I agree. Lore does make a lot of great things, but that's also the thing with lore, is like piecing together your own story. Like the FromSoft games are a prime example of that.
Yeah, I have to agree.
Even Destiny is a prime example of that. Like they give you kind of A to B storyline, but you want to know more in depth. You got to do all your weeklies and all these other things to find these pages, to read these pages to get the full story in a sense.
Yeah, because that's how I found out about I'm sorry, there's a lot of scary shit in Destiny. There really is, but that's how I found out about Dregden Yor with the rose or in the thorn.
I haven't. I'm still trying to catch up on Destiny lore. I've been out of the loop for like 8 years.
Hey, don't feel bad. I'm so far behind. It's like a lot of it doesn't make sense to me anymore.
I finished like the Witch Queen like a couple months ago, and I haven't been back to the game since.
I'm still doing the Witch Queen. I haven't played it since we played it, but yeah, like I like lore as in the sense of, hey, it helps add to the story. And I feel like if we got a little bit more lore for Oculus, I think that would be a good continuation of the movie, but I don't think they would need to go any further.
But that's the thing too, is like how much would you got to kind of have like a how long for a movie's sake, or for like, hey, if we do a sequel, we can do that as the intro, throw in the first movie and then do the sequel kind of thing. Like there's a lot of ways you could do it, but it's like, I that's what makes the unknown much better in my opinion, is because your imagination does more of that aspect and you're like, fuck.
I like the fact that it was strong enough to be a standalone film.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the things I love about it.
And you know, it would be kind of like if they try to do a sequel to Black Phone. Like, no, I'm gonna avoid spoilers, but it would be kind of like if they tried to do that. Whereas Black Phone by itself was a good standalone movie.
Oh my god, that was my movie of 21. I loved that movie. But yeah,
it's good. It's really good.
That were saying the sequel, or like if they wanted to do a sequel, like a lot of people like, I would love to see the characters like continue on with like. Well, I really can't even say anything.
Because I'm trying to avoid spoilers.
But just know that like I think a sequel will not be as good. I'll just leave it at that. But like the movie itself, as a one shot, as it is fantastic.
Oh yeah.
Within the past 5 years, that's probably like been my favorite so far.
in all honesty, I would consider that one to be a modern day classic because it tried something new. It was a psychological, it was a supernatural in an aspect, and it was a real life horror situation. Like, like this could happen in anywhere in America.
Real, that probably already has happened. But yeah, no, fantastic
Fair.
film. Love that movie.
And what was it? I'm on a subreddit in Reddit, but I'm on a subreddit in Facebook, you know.
I mean, I'm pretty sure there's many of those.
Yeah, I'm on a subreddit that's it's like r/horror films, where like people just talk about horror films constantly. And when Black Phone came out, or a little bit after, it wasn't like right after, it was when it was still in theaters. It was getting ready to come out of theaters and go into post-production Blu-rays and all that fun stuff. And someone commented, and they were like, well, what if we got a prequel with the backstory of all the kids? I was like, and my thought was, we already got that in the movie. You get that in the movie if you pay attention. And it's not a spoiler alert. That's just a big.
That's a fact. That's like literally the first things you see. But
yeah.
If quote unquote I wanted any background story, it'd be about, you know, the character, the main villain in the movie. But at the same time, it's like, that's one of the brilliance of it, is like, you don't know him, and that makes it that more terrifying. The less you know, the better. That's one of those things where, like I said, minimalistic info is so effective.
Yeah. I have to agree, is because it's like one of those things where it's like, if they did it, if they messed up on this aspect of it, it would have thrown the whole movie off. Whereas
it's also like, not everybody needs a reason to be doing these things. That's one of the things I love about horror. It's like, the less you know, the better. In that instance, like, maybe they're just completely crazy and they want to do this. Like, come on.
Yeah, like I like a perfect example of that in classic is honestly the Halloween franchise. Why was Michael killing? Nobody knows. He never told anybody his motive.
You don't even talk really. And it's the same thing with even Norman Bates. Like, he has his own reasons for doing it, but like, it's like that bipolarism of it, where he's like, I'm Norman right now, being this nice, friendly person. Then at night, I become this killer.
And see, that's actually why I like the original Psycho and American Psycho, was because of the fact that it was such an unassuming character, and it had that plot twist of like, it was Norman the whole time. He was just his mother. And you're like sitting there and you're like, that's a little crazy.
It's a little out there. Yeah, no, exactly. It's effective. It's simple yet effective. And like we were talking about also before we started recording, it's like the trend on TikTok right now. Very static horror and very old school elements are making a comeback, because like people on TikTok are doing very, very good horror little short one shots or stories or anything like that. And it's very, very classic horror, and it's done so well. And it still terrifies people to this day because it's super unsettling, it's super uncomfortable. Those original like older effects, again, like what I was talking about with the silent films, they had no real audio cues or like sound effects with it. It's just mostly music, and you see the picture moving and then words pop up. Like, that's where like Nosferatu or like Phantom of the Opera, the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari are like just super effective with just their visuals, and it's super unsettling, super uncomfortable. It's great. It's fantastic.
And I forget which director this was a trope of. This was an older director, but he wouldn't show the monster, quote unquote, until close to the end of the movie. And it was kind of like, it was like a trope of his. He passed away sometime in the 80s. I can't remember his name, but that was like his big thing, was that he would never show the actual monster until like the very end of the movie. And like,
not ringing a bell to me, but I could be mistaken on a lot of things with that.
I forget who it was. Let me Google it real quick. Scroll back up. And another more modern day classic that actually doesn't get the praise I think it deserves is 13 Ghosts. Because like there's
I'm on that opposite. I think it gets too much praise. I prefer the original 13 Ghosts back in, I think it was like the 40s or 50s. That's me personally. I know the late 90s or early 2000s, whenever it came out with Matthew Lillard and all of them, it's fine. I just didn't care for it. I don't like it. And then everyone's like, we need backstories on the ghosts. It's like, that's the brilliance of it, is you just know there's 13 ghosts that were fucking tortured and shitty people and or whatever, and now they're trying to repent and everything. It's just not my movie though. I can't.
There was a director. There was a director's extended cut Blu-ray version of the 13 Ghosts with Matthew Lillard that actually had the backstories of all the ghosts, and like it told you about all of them, like the great child and the dying and the dying mother, or I can't remember all the ghosts, but it tells you all of their backstories
enough to care. But yeah, no, I get that.
And like people just don't people want it in the form of a movie instead of it being a part of the movie that was
the thing was good. I feel also for me, the thing I feel when it comes to like a lot of people wanting more information and stuff like that, either A, don't fully pay attention, no offense to anybody, or two, they just want more of that world, but then they get more of that world and they're disappointed with it because it wasn't their version or how they wanted it. That's usually how those things turn out, in my opinion. I use like the Alien franchise as an example. Like everyone loves Aliens. Take it or leave it for Alien 3 and oh my god, what was the fourth one?
Anyway. I forgot. Yeah.
Anyway, but then you see Scott do the Prometheus series into Alien Covenant. I thought was fantastic. A lot of people didn't, and that's where it's like. But like again, for most people, it's like my vision didn't see David doing this. My vision was X, Y, and Z. It's like, but he's not done with the story. But there's again, it is what it is. But that's a prime example of people want more of it. They get more of it. They're disappointed because it wasn't their way.
Yeah. And
that's why I don't want to see more of like 13 Ghosts, because I was already like towards it, and getting more of it, I'm already but I know a lot of people would enjoy it, but would also shit on it because it's not the way they wanted it.
Yeah, and I feel like it was fine. I feel like it was fine with the original. I feel like it was fine with the remake, and we are having technical issues, but it's still recording, so we're good.
Yeah, no, I'm seeing that stutter a lot.
But yeah, it's getting close to quitting time. But yeah, I'll end this up on this last thought. I think that both were fine in their own respective right. I wouldn't want a individual franchise to be telling of how all 13 Ghosts came to be. Like if they were to do anything like that, I would just want to see the Black Bible, how it was derived. Yeah,
I get that. But we'll be ending this now. We're going to end with Grizz's question. My loves.
So for Arustuk Grizz on Twitter, he asked, I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say about the Bell Witch of Appalachia, which is going to be we've already predetermined the next episode, which is going to be the which one was
folklore it? And we said
supernatural entities.
Supernatural, that's what it was. That's right.
Yeah, supernatural entities is going to be the next. Oh, there goes the stutter.
Yep.
Supernatural entities is going to be the next episode. So Grizz, we will be answering your question then. Stay tuned for that, because classic horror, we could go on for literally days on the topic, because I'm a classic horror fan. Miz is a classic horror fan, and there's just so many to choose from. Modern day, old school,
so much to choose from.
Like, and I think we barely even touched the surface. So it's one of those things that we could go on for literal days about.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So
well, I think that'll be all for this one.
Yeah. Because let us know your thoughts. What you consider to be horror classics. They can be modern day. They can be old school. Whatever you prefer. Honestly,
your definition could be different from ours, but as long as it falls into that same category, what's your favorite, like classic or modern classic or anything like that? Because there's a huge list of that. Yeah, I have to agree. But for me, until next time. See you guys next time. Bye.